At 6:45 in the morning, my truck payment bounced. Not because I was broke, but because my daughter had quietly closed the account it pulled from. When I called her, my son-in-law answered instead, his voice flat and rehearsed. "We took over your finances, Frank. It's for your own good. You don't get to touch a checking account again without asking us first." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I hung up, drove straight to my bank, and asked for one thing. 90 minutes later, my phone had 52 missed calls. Before I tell you how a washed-up old machinist brought down two people who thought he was already finished, tell me where you're listening from this morning, neighbor. And if you believe respect has to be earned, not handed out because of blood, hit that subscribe button right now. My name is Frank Delaney. I'm 67 years old, and for 30 years I believed the proudest thing I ever built wasn't the machine shop in my name, it was my daughter. I was wrong about that, and it nearly cost me everything. That Thursday started like any other. I stopped at the hardware store on Route 9 to grab a bag of deck screws, the same errand I'd run 100 times. I handed my card to Ray behind the counter, a kid who'd been ringing me up since he was in high school. He swiped it, declined. He tried again, apologetic, embarrassed for me, declined again. I felt a strange heat crawl up the back of my neck, the kind of heat that comes right before you understand something you don't want to understand. I stepped outside and called my daughter, Melissa. She's 32, married 4 years now to a man named Trevor Voss, a real estate developer who talked more about deals than he ever closed. The phone rang twice. Trevor picked up. Not Melissa. Trevor. "Frank," he said, and something in his voice was wrong, too smooth, too prepared. "Your card's not going to work anymore. We handled it." I stood there in the parking lot, the truck ticking as it cooled behind me. "Handled what, Trevor?" "Your finances," he said, like he was reading off a script he'd rehearsed in a mirror. "You're 67, Frank. You had that dizzy spell at Thanksgiving. Melissa's worried sick. We can't keep watching you make risky decisions with money you don't fully understand anymore." So we stepped in. I heard shuffling, then Melissa's voice, thinner than I remembered it, but firm. "Dad, we love you. This is for your protection. From now on, if you need anything, groceries, gas, anything, you call us first. We'll decide what makes sense." The parking lot went quiet in my ears, the way a shop floor goes quiet right after a press jams. My own daughter, the little girl I'd taught to change a tire in this same lot, was telling me I needed permission to buy a bag of screws. I didn't shout. 40 years running a shop full of men twice, my temper taught me that the man who loses his voice first loses the room. I said, "Understood," and I hung up. I got in my truck and drove straight to Coastal Union Bank, not the branch by my house, the main branch downtown, where I'd banked since before Melissa was born. I didn't wait in the teller line. I walked into the office of the branch manager, a woman named Patricia Ruiz who'd handled my accounts since my wife Carol passed 9 years ago. She stood up so fast her rolling chair hit the wall. "Frank," she said, and her face had gone the color of old paper. "Trevor told us you were in the hospital. He said you'd had a stroke, that you weren't able to manage your own affairs anymore." I closed her office door. "I have not had a stroke, Patricia, and I did not give my son-in-law power of attorney over anything." She pulled a thick folder from her desk drawer, hands trembling slightly. "He was here at 9 this morning. He had a notarized power of attorney, full financial authority. He said your doctor recommended it after your episode." She slid the paper across her desk. My signature sat at the bottom, next to a notary stamp from an office I'd never once walked into in my life. I stared at the loops of the letters, the pressure of the pen strokes. It was close. It was good. It was not mine. "He forged this," I said quietly. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Frank. There's worse. He didn't just freeze your accounts. He initiated a transfer out of your equipment reserve fund, $22,000. He said it was for a medical consultation retainer. $22,000. That fund wasn't for doctors. That fund was the buffer that kept my shop's payroll running in a slow month. My son-in-law hadn't stepped in to protect me. He'd started bleeding me dry while I was still standing in front of him." Patricia reached for her desk phone. "I'm calling the police, Frank. This is felony forgery." "No," I said. "Not yet." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind right there in her office. "He stole from you. He forged a legal document." "I know exactly what he did," I said, sitting down across from her. "But if we call the police now, he panics. He lawyers up, hides the cash, and cries victim to my own daughter." I don't want him scared. I want him comfortable. Freeze the account. Flag that transfer as unauthorized. Lock it down completely. But leave that power of attorney active in the system. Active? Why on earth would you want that? Because I want him to reach for it again, I said. A man doesn't stop pulling a trigger on a gun he thinks still has bullets in it. What Trevor didn't know, what I'd made sure nobody but my late wife and my lawyer ever knew, was that the shop's checking account, the one he just gutted, was pocket change. 15 years ago, after I sold the patent rights on a fabrication process I developed to a national supplier, I put the bulk of that money into a trust managed by a firm 2 states away, completely separate from anything with my name plastered on it publicly. Trevor looked at my Carhartt jacket, my '09 pickup, and my modest brick ranch house, and he decided he knew exactly what he was dealing with. He thought he'd found an easy old man sitting on a small nest egg. He had no idea he was standing next to a vault with a door he couldn't even see. But sitting there in Patricia's office, a colder thought cut through the anger. If Trevor was desperate enough to forge a legal document over $22,000, what else did that document claim to cover? I stood up so fast my knee cracked against the desk. Patricia, secure that account. I have to go. I drove home faster than I should have. Turning onto my street, I saw Trevor's black SUV parked crooked in my driveway like he already owned the place. I parked 2 houses down, walked up quiet, and found my own front door standing open. Voices drifted from the living room. A stranger's voice, clipped and professional. The kitchen's original, which knocks the value down some. But with the lot size, you're still looking at a strong number. A real estate appraiser. We need this moving fast, Trevor said, sounding relaxed, almost cheerful. My father-in-law's health situation means we need liquidity soon. Cash buyer, as is, no repairs. Then Melissa's voice, and something in it made my chest go tight. And that recliner in the garage, just have someone haul it? It's disgusting anyway. It still smells like Mom's cigarettes. That recliner was the last thing Carol ever sat in. She'd spent her final 6 months in that chair by the window, watching the birds at the feeder I built her. My daughter was standing in my living room offering her mother's deathbed chair to a stranger like it was garbage at the curb. Every muscle in my body wanted to walk in there and put my fist through that appraiser's clipboard. Instead, I did what I'd done on the shop floor 1,000 times. When a man tried to provoke me into a mistake, I went still. I let my shoulders sag. I let my eyes go glassy and slow. I shuffled into the living room like my knees had aged 20 years since breakfast. Trevor, I said, my voice trembling on purpose. Who are these people? Have you seen my reading glasses? The appraiser looked at me with immediate, uncomfortable pity. Trevor and Melissa turned around, and I watched the panic on their faces melt into smug, satisfied relief. They believed it. They believed the stress of the morning had finally cracked the old man's mind wide open. Trevor crossed the room and put a hand on my shoulder, gentle as a hospice nurse. It's okay, Frank. Just a rough morning. Let's get you settled down for a nap. Over the top of my head, I caught him trade a look with Melissa, a victorious little smile. They thought they'd already won. They had no idea I was only just beginning. The moment that SUV backed out of the driveway, my trembling hands went perfectly still. I straightened up, rolled my shoulders back, and walked straight to the garage. Behind a stack of paint cans and an old engine hoist sat a locked steel cabinet I'd welded myself 30 years ago, back when the shop still kept cash payroll on hand overnight. I spun the combinetong. Inside sat a stack of backup hard drives, some emergency cash, and an old prepaid flip phone I kept charged for exactly this kind of situation. A line nobody but one man had the number to. I dialed. It rang twice. Warren Chase. Warren wasn't just my attorney. He was the man who'd sat across from me at my kitchen table the week after Carol's funeral and told me, gently but firmly, that grief makes people careless with money, and careless money gets stolen by the people closest to you. He'd built the trust that kept my real wealth invisible. I should have trusted his instincts about people a lot sooner than I did. Warren, it's Frank. I need you to drop everything. I laid it out, the forged power of attorney, the stolen 22 grand, the appraiser walking through my living room while I was supposedly resting at home. Warren went quiet for a second. Then I heard a pen hit his desk. Frank, that's federal document fraud the second he presented that paper to a financial institution. I can have an injunction filed within the hour. Authorities at his door by dinner. He paused. But you understand what that means. It's your daughter too, Frank. Do you want to send your own child to prison alongside him? I stared at the wall of my garage, at Carol's old gardening tools still hanging where she'd left them. I thought of Melissa at 7 years old, riding on my shoulders through the shop floor while the men waved at her. Then I thought about the recliner, about "it still smells like mom's cigarettes," said with a curled lip like Carol had been an inconvenience instead of the love of my life. "I don't want him arrested tomorrow, Warren," I said, my voice flat and cold. "I want to know exactly why a man with a luxury SUV needed $22,000 badly enough to forge my signature. Find the wound. Then we'll decide how deep to open it." "Give me until morning," Warren said. I didn't sleep that night. At sunrise, the flip phone buzzed on my workbench. Warren didn't bother with pleasantries. "Trevor's real estate business isn't a business, Frank. It's a shell holding together a mountain of debt. He's $890,000 underwater on 2 failed developments. His investors pulled out 5 months ago. He's been floating everything on short-term hard money loans at brutal interest, and the lenders are done being patient. If he doesn't produce real capital in 3 weeks, they force involuntary bankruptcy and seize what's left. Nearly $900,000. I thought about every dinner at my table where Trevor bragged about his portfolio, sipping wine he apparently couldn't afford, wearing a watch that cost more than my first car. "There's more," Warren said, his voice darkening. "Melissa's carrying about $60,000 in personal credit card debt. The car, the clothes, that kitchen renovation she posted all over the internet, none of it's paid for. They're not comfortable, Frank. They're drowning, and they're doing it in front of everybody." It clicked into place with sickening clarity. My $22,000 wasn't the plan. It was a stopgap. They needed my house. They needed the equity in it, and fast. And they were willing to let me end up homeless to save their reputation with people who mattered less to them than a leased BMW. "They're desperate," I said quietly. "And desperate people get dangerous." "You have no idea," Warren said. And for the first time in 15 years, I heard real worry in his voice. "That forged power of attorney won't hold up if you're lucid and fighting it in a courtroom. Trevor knows that. Which means he's already working on making sure you're not considered lucid at all." My investigator flagged encrypted messages Trevor sent last night to a private medical office. "He's not looking for a real evaluation, Frank. He's shopping for a doctor willing to sign off on early-stage dementia for cash. If he gets that signature, the power of attorney becomes bulletproof. You lose your rights, your voice, your house, all of it, overnight." The garage seemed to shrink around me. My own son-in-law wasn't just stealing from me. He was preparing to erase me. "Warren," I said, once the cold clarity settled back into my chest, "pull up the file on the Carol Delaney Memorial Trust. I have it open. Remove Trevor and Melissa. All of it, primary, contingent, everything. If something happens to me today, they don't inherit a dollar. It defaults entirely to the Veteran Scholarship Fund Carol and I set up." "Done," Warren said, keys clacking. "Frank, that's just cutting off the future. What about right now?" "Trevor's business loans," I said. 2 years ago, when he started this development company, the banks only extended him that kind of credit because somebody quietly stood behind him as a private guarantor. "Call the lending division. Revoke it. Pull my backing completely." Warren exhaled slowly. "Frank, if I pull collateral out from under a company already missing payments, their risk system flags it instantly. They'll issue a margin call within 24 hours. "Good," I said. "Pull it." "You understand what you're doing," Warren said. "You're not just cutting his allowance. You're pulling the plug." He wanted to put a fake diagnosis on my chart and drug me into silence so he could sell my house out from under me, I said. "Pull the plug, Warren." By that evening, the invitation came a text from Melissa, warm and eager, asking me over for a family dinner. Pot roast, her favorite, just the 3 of us catching up. 2 days earlier, that message would have made my whole week. Now I understood exactly what it was. Not a dinner. An ambush with place settings. I drove to their townhouse, a rental they treated like a mansion, 3 months behind on payments according to what Warren had found. Melissa opened the door and hugged me a beat too long, her perfume thick enough to mask the tension underneath it. Trevor poured me wine from a bottle that cost more than my monthly gas budget and asked, with real concern painted on his face, how I was feeling after my rough morning. I let my hands tremble slightly around the wine glass. I let my gaze drift. They ate it up. Once the plates were cleared, the warmth in the room dropped like a curtain. Trevor reached into a leather folder and slid a document across the table, laying a gold pen on top of it with a soft, deliberate click. "Dad," he said, using a word he'd never once called me, "in 4 years of marriage, we've been thinking about your future. There's a wonderful assisted living community out past the interstate. Round-the-clock care, beautiful grounds. We just need you to sign over the deed on the house so we can get it listed and secure your spot. Melissa placed her cold hand over mine. We'll handle everything, Dad. You'll never have to worry about a bill again. I looked down at the quit-claim deed. A full, unconditional transfer of the house I'd built with Carol into Trevor's name. They weren't planning to put me anywhere nice. They were planning to dump me in the cheapest facility they could find and pocket the difference to pay off a leased BMW and a maxed-out credit card. I picked up the gold pen. I brought the tip toward the signature line. Trevor leaned in, breath shallow with anticipation. And then I moved my elbow, just slightly, catching the base of my wine glass. It tipped, and a wave of deep red spread across the deed, bleeding the ink into a ruined purple mess. For one long second, nobody moved. Then Trevor exploded. He shoved his chair back so hard it crashed to the floor. "You senile old fool! Do you have any idea what you just did?" I sat perfectly still. "I know exactly what I did." "You think spilling a glass of wine saves you?" he snarled, leaning across the table until his face was inches from mine. "It doesn't matter. We already talked to a doctor. He's ready to certify you incompetent whenever we need it. You're going to lose everything, old man. We're going to take it all." Melissa stood beside him now, and whatever softness she'd worn at the door was gone, replaced by something sharp and mean. "You'd better start behaving, Dad. Because if you keep making this difficult, we won't put you somewhere nice. We'll find the worst state facility in 3 counties and leave you there. Sign the new papers tomorrow, or you rot." I let the silence stretch. Then I stood, and I didn't shuffle. I stood the way I used to stand on the shop floor when a customer tried to walk out on a contract, straight-backed, steady-eyed. Trevor blinked, thrown by the sudden change. "Good luck with that $890,000, Trevor," I said quietly. The color drained out of his face so fast he looked gray under the dining room lights. Melissa's hand flew to her mouth. "How do you know about that?" Trevor rasped. I didn't answer. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and left them standing over a ruined contract and a puddle of wine. The next morning I sat on my back porch with black coffee while my phone buzzed itself off the little side table, one call after another. 52 missed calls from Trevor, each one more desperate than the last. I let it ring a third time before I finally answered. "Dad, please," Trevor said, and the confident developer voice was gone, replaced by something ragged and cracked. "What did you do to my business?" They froze everything. Payroll, operating accounts, my cards, all of it's declining. They're demanding almost $1 million by Friday, or they seize the company. "I did exactly what you told me to do," I said calmly. "You said I was too old to be trusted with money. So I simplified my life. I'm not managing your credit line anymore." "You can't do this," he begged. "I'll lose everything. Melissa will leave me." "You stopped being family to me the moment you decided my life was worth less than a leased BMW," I said, and I ended the call. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again, Patricia, from the bank, breathless and rattled. "Frank, your son-in-law is standing in my lobby right now, waving that forged power of attorney, demanding we wire funds out of your secondary savings before you can interfere. Security's involved. It's a scene. Put your phone on the counter, Patricia. Speaker, full volume." I heard the acoustics shift, the murmur of a crowded lobby suddenly audible. Trevor was mid-rant, threatening to sue the entire bank. I waited for a lull. "Trevor," I said, letting my voice carry through the little speaker. The lobby went dead silent. "Dad?" "What?" His voice shrank instantly. "I'm perfectly lucid," I said, "and I am watching you, right now, attempt to defraud a federal financial institution using a document you forged. Patricia, that power of attorney is fake. I never signed it. If he doesn't leave those premises immediately, call the police and press charges for forgery." I heard the gasp ripple through the lobby. I heard Trevor's voice crack apart, begging, then heard the heavier voices of security guards moving in. I let the call run until I heard the doors slide shut behind him, cutting off his shouting, and only then did I hang up. While Trevor was being walked out of a bank lobby in front of strangers, Melissa was 3 miles away in a boutique downtown, trying to buy a pair of designer boots on a card that had already been quietly severed. Declined. She tried a second card, a third, all dead. Humiliated in front of a line of shoppers, she stormed out toward the parking garage, only to find a tow truck already hooking chains to her leased BMW, 90 days delinquent, repossession final. She stood there in the concrete garage as her prized car was winched onto a flatbed, and when she finally reached Trevor on the phone, his answer gutted her. He pulled the guarantee, Mel. He was the reason we ever got approved for anything. It's over. That night, cornered and furious, they went back to what remained of their plan. If a doctor certified me incompetent, none of this would matter. Trevor still had a little cash left, the $22,000 he'd stolen from me in the first place, and he used it to pay a man named Dr. Halbrook, who ran a rundown clinic outside the industrial park, and according to Warren's investigator, made a habit of signing incapacity orders for wealthy families who wanted inconvenient relatives quietly removed. Halbrook took the cash, signed a fraudulent emergency directive without ever examining me, and told Trevor a private transport crew could have me removed from my home within the hour. What Trevor and Melissa didn't know was that Warren's investigator had been sitting across the street in an unmarked car the entire time, a hidden camera and recorder already planted in that office from an earlier visit to a disgruntled receptionist. Every dollar, every word, every signature was captured in high definition. They bought the fake hold, the investigator told Warren over the phone. They're headed to Frank's house right now with 2 orderlies and the doctor. Warren called me immediately. Frank, get somewhere safe. I'm bringing detectives to your address myself. I looked around my living room, Carol's recliner, still sitting by the window, spared from the dumpster only because I'd hauled it out before the appraiser's crew came back. I'm not hiding in my own house, Warren. Bring your people. Kill the lights and sirens on the way in. I want him walking in believing he's already won. I put the kettle on. I turned on every light in the house. I sat down in Carol's recliner, poured myself a cup of coffee, and waited. The engine noise hit first too fast, tires screeching against the curb. A second vehicle right behind it, heavier. A diesel rattle. Car doors slammed. Boots on gravel. Trevor didn't bother knocking. He kicked my front door so hard it cracked against the wall. He looked like a different man than the one who'd poured me wine 2 nights earlier, tie gone, shirt soaked through, eyes wild. Behind him came Melissa, phone raised, recording, narrating for some imaginary courtroom about how dangerous it was that I'd left my door unlocked, how confused I clearly was, how they were only trying to help. Behind her, Dr. Halbrook clutched his folder of fraudulent paperwork, flanked by 2 large men in gray scrubs who looked more like bouncers than nurses. I didn't move. I took a slow sip of coffee. You're 5 minutes late, I said. Trevor's face twisted in confusion. And that's when the kitchen door swung open, and Warren stepped through it. 2 plainclothes detectives flanking him, badges already out and gleaming under my living room lights. Trevor's whole body seemed to collapse inward. The fraudulent directive slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. Melissa lowered her phone, the recording light still blinking, capturing her own unraveling instead. Warren picked the paper up off the floor and turned to Dr. Halbrook. You signed an involuntary commitment order without ever examining the patient. I think these officers would love to hear how thorough that evaluation really was. He held up his phone and played the recording. The whole living room heard it, Trevor demanding the hold, Melissa coldly explaining I had no one to defend me, and Halbrook's voice acknowledging the cash, warning them about the liability of skipping an actual evaluation. The 2 orderlies backed toward the door the second they understood what they'd actually been hired for. Halbrook bolted for the exit and didn't make it 3 steps before a detective slammed him against the doorframe and cuffed him. You're making a mistake, Halbrook shouted. I'm a licensed. You have the right to remain silent, the detective said. Use it. The detective turned to Trevor next. You're under arrest. Document forgery, conspiracy to defraud, medical bribery. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Trevor's knees gave out. He crumpled to the floor, sobbing, and to my genuine surprise, he crawled across my own living room floor toward me, grabbing at the leg of my jeans. Dad, please. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. I'm your son-in-law, please. I looked down at him for a long moment. 32 years of reaching down to pull my daughter's husband out of every hole he'd ever dug himself into flashed through my mind. Then I gently peeled his fingers off my jeans and stepped back. You told me I was too old to manage my own money, I said. Let's see how well my lawyer manages your sentence. Meanwhile, Melissa had pressed herself flat against the hallway wall, watching her husband break apart on my floor. When the second detective approached her with cuffs, she screamed that she was a victim, that she'd known nothing, that Trevor had forced her to come. She threw him under every wheel of that bus without hesitation. Trevor looked up from the floor and watched his own wife point a shaking finger at him to save herself, and something in his face broke worse than the handcuffs ever could. They were both taken out in restraints, past the porch lights flicking on up and down my street, past neighbors in bathrobes standing on their lawns watching the spectacle unfold. The cruiser doors slammed. The engines pulled away. My living room went quiet. Warren sat across from me at the kitchen table afterward and laid out the paperwork, permanent restraining orders, keeping both of them 500 feet from me, my property, and every financial institution I used. And finally, the document I'd been holding on to since the week after Carol died. The irrevocable transfer of the trust into the Veterans Scholarship Fund we'd built in her name. I signed both without a moment's hesitation. Justin was sentenced 4 months later, 5 years federal. No parole. His development company liquidated to cover what remained of the debt. Within 2 weeks of his arrest, Melissa filed for divorce, desperate to separate herself legally from the wreckage. She'd pointed her finger at him in my hallway to save herself, and she pointed her lawyers at him next. I sold the house that spring to a young couple, expecting their first child, the same wide-eyed hope in their faces that Carol and I once carried up that same driveway. I moved 2 states over to a small cabin on a quiet lake, far from the noise of what my old life had become. A year later, I still start every morning the same way: I walk down to the little coffee shop by the water, the same order, the same friendly nod from the man behind the counter. I tap my card against the reader. It approves instantly, and every single time, that small, ordinary sound still feels like a kind of quiet victory. Money was never meant to be a leash somebody else holds. It's just a tool, and it finally belongs to me again, instead of the people who tried to take it. If there's one thing this whole ordeal taught me, it's that unconditional love was never supposed to mean unconditional surrender. Protecting the people you love doesn't mean handing them the keys to your entire life. And when someone you raised looks at your generosity and sees only weakness to exploit, walking away isn't cruelty. It's the last, most necessary act of self-respect you have left. If this story meant something to you, hit like, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight, neighbor.